Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Adam Minsky, and I'm the President and CEO of UJA Federation. It's wonderful to see so many people tuning in online, and we appreciate you taking the time for these important noon hour updates. We feel it's incredibly important for our community to be kept informed and connected, given all that's happening right now. Last week, we announced the launch of a new, independent, best-in-class agency dedicated to the security of our local Jewish community. It's named the Jewish Security Network, or JSN. The JSN and its team are going to make a significant impact in transforming our community's approach to security over the coming years. And so it was important to us that we provide this opportunity to brief you about this initiative and to answer your questions. As with our last seminar briefings, my colleagues will spend the first part of the program providing you with the information you need to know. First, we're going to hear from Jeff Rosenthal, Chair of the Board of UJA Federation. After Jeff, Daniel Held, UJA's Chief Program Officer. And then after Daniel, we'll hear from Javon Greenblatt, Executive Director of the Jewish Security Network. Then there'll be time for question and answers. For that, we'll be passing the mic to Steve McDonald, UJA's Vice President of Communications and Marketing, who will moderate the session. At any time during the webinar, you can type your questions into the chat function, and we'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A portion. With that, I'm pleased to invite Jeff Rosenthal, Chair of the Board of UJA Federation, to begin the program.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you all for joining us today for a conversation that I wish we weren't having, but one that unfortunately is both necessary and urgent given what's happening in the world today. Simply put, in the months since October 7th, we've reached a tipping point when it comes to the rise of anti-Semitism in our city and in our country. While I won't begin to list the multitude of hate crimes, threats, and reprehensible incidents targeting our community, one alarming fact stands out above all others. According to police data, a Jew living in Toronto is now 5 times more likely to be the victim of a police-reported hate crime than a Jew living in New York City. In many ways, it feels as though the social contract is being broken. And with that, a growing number of Canadian Jews, especially younger parents that I speak with, are losing confidence in Canada as a safe place to raise their children for the long term. This is especially disturbing when you consider that Toronto has long been seen as a leading example of strength and success in the diaspora. You don't have to look very far to see countless examples of our thriving life within our community, be it in our synagogues or day schools, our camps, Hillels, or JCCs, our wonderful Jewish social service agencies, or a record-setting 50,000 person strong Walk with Israel. The vibrant life of our community and our ability to continue to contribute to Canadian society while being publicly and proudly Jewish is a defining characteristic of being Jewish in Toronto. And while UJA does many things locally and globally, our purpose is very simple. We exist to preserve and strengthen our Jewish way of life in every respect, and our physical security is the core foundation of that way of life. With this in mind, shortly after October 7th, our board asked UJA professional leadership to make the physical security of our community the highest priority of our organization. Because we can't afford to be complacent, and the actions we take when our community's strength is tested will ultimately shape our community for decades to come. And so our professional leadership looked to best practices and lessons learned from others in the Jewish diaspora, who are far more advanced in taking ownership of their physical security, such as in Australia, France, the UK, and elsewhere. One of the common threads of these incredibly resilient communities is the critical importance of having a dedicated agency to oversee security on a community-wide scale. As we'll hear today, a strong and independent security agency will be focused on building a culture of resilience and empowerment when it comes to this challenge, by giving our community the tools to participate and take greater personal responsibility for the security of our community. Daniel Held, UJA's Chief Program Officer, was instrumental in helping to develop the roadmap to bring this vision to life, leading up to the launch of the Jewish Security Network. I'd now like to pass the mic to Daniel to share some insights into UJA's strategy.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you to the entire board for recognizing the challenges that we need to face, and taking the bull by the horn. I think the story really starts in 2018 after the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. At that time, UJA's leadership went to Pittsburgh to learn from the FBI and the community security leaderships the lessons they had learned about that incident. Out of that was born UJA Community Security, which has served an important role as our community consultant and advisor to Jewish institutions, as well as our foremost liaison to law enforcement. After October 7th, however, and the dramatic increase in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks here in our community, we recognize the need for change on a level far beyond the scope of a single UJA department. The experience of learning from other diaspora communities showed the need for a single agency with a community-wide mandate to strengthen our collective security. That's why the Jewish Security Network, JSN, was established as a professional and independent agency governed by its own board of directors. But of course, there are many different ways to strengthen community security, and we recognized from the beginning that it was vitally important for us to be focused, to start by asking ourselves, when we look back 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years from now, what are the kinds of changes we believe will have an enduring transformational impact in keeping our community safe and ensuring we can thrive for many years to come? Research and learning of best practices from around the world identified 4 areas of priority, which is where the JSN will be focusing its energy. First, a centralized command and control. JSN will have a single hub that not only allows community members to report concerning incidences, but also allows JSN to integrate the security systems of Jewish institutions into a security operations center that can monitor and coordinate on a community-wide basis. Second, volunteer training and empowerment. JSN will empower community members with the tools that will enable them to be active participants, not just passengers, but active participants when it comes to keeping our community safe. JSN will help our entire community become the eyes and ears of security. Third, hardening physical security at Jewish institutions. Our community needs to have a consistent community-wide standard when it comes to the physical security infrastructure and technology that Jewish institutions use. We can't allow institutions to navigate this on their own, but JSN will bring expertise and investments of both resources and expertise to ensure a meaningful quality of security infrastructure across the community. Fourth, monitoring our threat environment and ensuring a rapid flow of critical information to our security partners, especially law enforcement. JSN will create research and analysis capabilities that enable the community to identify and track potential threats before they emerge, and in turn share this information with authorities to take appropriate action. JSN has identified these 4 areas to be core for its work at safeguarding our community. To lead our community forward in these 4 areas, JSN recognized the need to recruit strong and experienced professionals to lead the network, which I'm pleased to share has already been up and running in advance of the beginning of the school year just a couple of weeks ago. Today, I'm happy to introduce you to Jovan Greenblatt, who has joined JSN to serve in the role of executive director. Jovan brings more than 30 years of experience in community security, including leading the community security organization in Johannesburg, South Africa, which aligns with the model that JSN is developing and implementing here in Toronto. Jovan has also made significant progress in building out a professional team with robust experience and knowledge across the 4 priority areas I've already described. I'm now really pleased to introduce Jovan to our community and invite him to speak. After Jovan's presentation, we'll begin a Q&A session. Jovan, thank you for joining us today and for taking this time to talk about this vitally important work of JSN.
Thank you, Dan, and really amazing to meet everyone and to have this opportunity to address the community. As Dan says, I'm Jovan Greenblatt. I've been involved in the protection of the Jewish community of Johannesburg for the past 30 years, initially starting out as a volunteer in the organization and progressing and eventually joining the organization as a full-time staff member. I'm just going to share my screen with you quickly. Dan, you can see that?
Yes.
Great. So the primary purpose of any organization like JSN, as Dan mentioned, in the UK, in the States, in Australia or South Africa, is really empowering the Jewish community. That's one of the fundamental principles of what we're doing. A little bit about myself. I joined the organization in 1994 out of university. I joined as a volunteer. I progressed through the ranks. I then worked for the organization in the late 90s for a number of years, decided to go out into the corporate world, and at the end of 2012, joined the CSO in Johannesburg as the director and CEO of the company. There's one fundamental principle that we have as any organization that is responsible for protecting the Jewish community, and that's ensuring, and although this sounds like a very scary concept, that's ensuring zero casualties. So when I first heard of this concept, I didn't understand what zero casualties mean. How is it possible that any organization, whether it's government, police, an organization like ours, or security companies, can ensure zero casualties? And what I came to realize is this is a principle. And the principle is that we as an organization, as a community, need to do everything within our power to ensure that we never get to a stage when an incident or an attack happens against our community. And this is the fundamental principle of everything we do in security, is prevention. So very often I get the question asked, well, what am I going to do as a community member to stop something from happening? We're not expecting everyone to be trained soldiers. We're not expecting people to be highly skilled and equipped at every single level. What we are asking is that the community and the volunteers in the organization step up and do the fundamental things of security, closing the front door, being vigilant and aware, addressing anything that's out of the ordinary. And only we as the community members, and I'm not taking away anything that security companies or police are involved in and do, because we work very closely with them. We see them as valuable and very important partners for us. But community members understand what belongs and what doesn't. So when you're at your child's school, standing duty as a volunteer, or you're standing duty as a protector or involved in the security of the synagogue that you go to, it is really you as a community member that understands the environment, understands what belongs, what doesn't belong, knows when to report something to the authorities, to JSN, as Dan spoke about, through the new SOC that we're going to be setting up and in the process of doing. So the majority of work that we do as security specialists, as volunteers, and even police and security officers is to prevent the attack from happening by having some fundamentals in place. Physical security, the right people with the right attitude and the right levels of training, and that differs across the board, and then the right procedures to ensure that our community is always protected and that we are picking up things before they actually become a problem or a situation. If, God forbid, we move to something actually happening, an incident against our community, then what we say is that we've already missed all the signs that led up to it, all the things that we could have picked up beforehand, and we've moved through to something happening. Now all we're doing is mitigating our failures or managing our failures. We will train for this. I think it's critical. We live in a world where things happen, and it's absolutely important that we are prepared and we have the right processes in place, and JSN will take the lead on this throughout our community, at our facilities, across our schools and shuls and community facilities, across events, to prepare the community, God forbid something should happen. But actually, where the real work is done is in preventing that from happening in the first place. By way of example, we often look at the what we need to do, but you cannot do the what until you understand why we do the things. Why have we chosen these 4 primary priorities as an organization? There are many things that we can do. There are many things that over time that we will take on as an organization. But the principle, the initial 4 primary things that we're going to do are going to be explained through a number of stories that I'm going to go through now. These are all incidences, real incidences that happened across the world, Jewish communities and non-Jewish communities, attacks that were prevented or attacks that happened. And this isn't to cast judgment on anyone who did anything out there. What it is to say is that we as an organization, as a community, need to understand what's happening out in the world. We need to learn from the mistakes to make sure that we don't make those mistakes. And we also need to learn from the successes where something was done well and where we can enhance that and apply that across our community. So in 1994, in Argentina, the AMIA building, which is the Jewish Community Center of Buenos Aires, was bombed. A truck bomb with 500 kilograms of explosives drove through the front entrance of the building into the lobby and detonated. It was a 6-story building and it brought the whole thing down. Now, the story is not about scaring the community. This isn't about scaring people into capitulation and to do something. This is explaining a fundamental principle of physical security. Because a number of months beforehand, an organization very much like the JSN approached to the community leadership and asked them to put some bollards outside the front, concrete bollards outside the front entrance, so this specific type of attack and others couldn't take place. It was expensive at the time, and the community made a decision not to do it, but they took their time to put these bollards in place. And unfortunately, before they did put them in place, this attack happened. Had they acted quickly, had the community applied for funding or raised the funding and put these fundamental security measures, physical security measures in place, 2 things would have happened. Number one, the attacks would have decided that this wasn't for them. They wouldn't have achieved their end goal and would have gone somewhere else. Number 2, if they had decided to go ahead with this, the devastation would have been much less because it wouldn't have happened inside the building, it would have happened outside. Once again, not to scare you, but to explain to you why we are choosing this physical security structure, putting funding into securing, hardening all our facilities, not turning them into prisons, not turning them into compounds. There are many things that we can do to keep the beautiful Jewish way of life that we have, but at the same time, putting mechanisms and technologies in place to secure them. On the opposite end of the spectrum was an attack that happened in Hell, Germany in 2019. And a right-wing individual, Stephen Balint, drove 45 minutes to the closest shul he could find on Yom Kippur and tried to attack the Jewish community of Hell. He attempted to get through the front door. He had makeshift weapons. He tried to get inside. And as much as he tried, he couldn't breach that door and he couldn't get into the facility. Why? Because a number of months before, the community had applied for funding, had raised some money themselves, had implemented some physical security measures, had reinforced the front door. And not only had they reinforced the front door, but they also applied security procedures that ensured that that door was kept closed during services. Either they had security people outside, volunteers and professional, or when there weren't security people outside, that door was kept closed. Stefan Balint arrived, tried to get through that door, didn't manage to, and the 87 people or so inside on Yom Kippur were saved. A little video to show you this, and then we'll move on. And off he goes. And this is the importance of doing the simple things, not getting complicated about security, but just investing. And it doesn't always have to cost a fortune. There are a lot of things that cost nothing or a very little bit, a little amount. And those that are important that do cost, of course, that we will put processes and put things in place to assist you in implementing those over time. Another success story, and it's counterintuitive to say something about Pittsburgh synagogue shooting as a success story. So I'm not going to talk about what actually happened on the day. I think everyone knows that. What is important and what is a fundamental lesson that was learned out of this is a number of months before this attack, And this is a presentation that was done by one of the community leaders who was inside the synagogue at the time of the attack. He told us that he had gone to active shooter training put on by a Jewish organization like JSN. He was very begrudgingly coerced into going. As a community leader, he was asked to go. He needed to lead by example. He didn't think it was necessary, yet he went anyway. After the training, he forgot about this. And he says it was very subconscious in there, in his mind. He understood for the first time subconsciously that things like this could possibly happen. And he knew subconsciously as well what to do. It was very simple training. Once again, not military style, not anything complicated. On the day of the attack, he explained to us that in the section of the synagogue where he was, the attacker walked inside, and he was the only survivor on that day in that section of the synagogue. And he puts us down to the training that he did, that he dismissed, that he'd forgotten about. And this talks very much to the fact that we as an organization, we as a community, as synagogues, as schools, as community facilities, need to make sure that we are practicing and preparing our community. It doesn't have to be scary, but they do have to understand that things like this can happen, and it's our responsibility to prepare our community to prevent these things from happening. So doing active shooter drills, doing evacuations and evacuations, practicing emergency procedures with our community, with our security personnel on a regular basis, is a fundamental principle, and we will be bringing that to all the facilities and assisting you in implementing that across the board. So that's another absolutely important thing that, once again, we have an example of this saving lives. We talk about the concept of volunteers, and the organization is going to be built very much on the community being empowered to protect itself. We don't dismiss the importance of government, of police, of the amazing security officers that work outside our synagogues and our schools, of the security companies and the others that support us and help us. Yet, I come from South Africa, and the one thing that I've learned in this environment is that you do not outsource your security to anyone else. You work alongside other people, but you take ownership and responsibility for your own security, for that of your family and loved ones, and for that of your community. We are the ones that understand the environment better than anyone else. We are the ones that have the motivation to protect our loved ones. And I'm not asking that the community now go and do crazy training and become soldiers and do things like that. All I'm saying is the fundamental things of awareness, of basic training, of understanding the environment, of seeing something, saying something, and doing something about it, whether that is addressing the issue, questioning somebody, or actually reporting that to us at JSN through the SOC or other places. These are all the fundamental things. So in Marseille, France, 2021, 3 unarmed parent protectors with basic training and awareness course that they'd done was standing duty outside their children's school. They noticed an individual sitting in a car. It was seemed out. They understood the environment. They knew this wasn't normal. And they approached the individual with the security officer to see what he was there. As they approached him, he got out of his car with a large knife. He started walking, not towards a school because he knew he wasn't going to get anywhere near the school now, towards a kosher supermarket across the road. These unarmed individuals, parent protectors, tackled him, took him down to the ground, detained him, and held him there. Now, these are acts of bravery, but this is what is done. This is what our community does to save and protect their fellow community members, those around them, their children. The power of volunteers is an absolutely fundamental element of protecting Jewish communities. It's a model that's used all over the world. It's used across Europe, the States, into Africa and Australia. And this is the model that we're going to be working on and pushing alongside all the other foundations that we've been speaking about. The same principle was an attack that happened against a synagogue in South Africa in 1998. A pipe bomb was thrown at an empty shul. Everyone asked, why would they throw a pipe bomb at an empty shul? There was no one there. It was late at night. It was on the night of Hanukkah. So it was in December. Cape Town, which is a tourist city, it's summer for South Africa. was packed with community members from all over the world, all over South Africa. And the question was asked, why an empty shul? Anyway, these individuals were arrested a number of months later for something else. And in the court documents, they tied them to this attack against the empty shul, and they asked them, why did you attack an empty shul? And they said that wasn't their target. The target was the busiest shul in Cape Town. At the time that they were going to carry out the attack, it was packed with thousands of community members for the Hanukkah celebrations. They were going to throw the device in when the community was leaving, and they saw soldiers standing outside, soldiers and security officers standing outside. They knew that security was too tight. They knew they wouldn't succeed, and they left. What they didn't realize is those weren't police officers and soldiers. Those were vigilant community members, part of the shul, part of the community that had done some basic training. They were alert, they were aware, they knew what was happening around them. These individuals saw them and recognized that they would be picked up before they could do anything. So they went somewhere else, and by the time they got there, the shul was closed and they threw it in anyway. It's an amazing thing to think that these volunteers, for a year, did not know that they had saved numerous lives. They didn't even know, just by being present, they didn't know that they had stopped this attack. It only came out in a leaked court document a number of months, a year later, after the attack. And for the first time, those individuals realized what they had done. Once again, the power of volunteers, the power of proactive protection, the power of communities standing up and taking ownership of their own security and not outsourcing it to someone else and expecting someone else to look after us. A similar situation is talking about the link between all the different elements that we've been speaking about. So we talk about a command and control center, a 24-hour emergency control room. We're talking about understanding our environment. We're talking about an aware, alert community that are comfortable to report things that they don't understand, they don't know, they're uncomfortable with, it feels wrong. In this specific case, a massive attack was foiled against the largest Jewish school in South Africa. And it was foiled for one reason. A community member contacted the Johannesburg control room and explained to them that he had a colleague at work who was a very nice guy for a while, but seemed to be becoming more radical. He was very uncomfortable around him because of his radical behavior. And on the day that this individual, the person becoming radical, asked to be separated from women, he panicked, he didn't know what to do, and he phoned the CSO control room. The control room passed that information onto an investigation team. They investigated, they looked into the individual, they unearthed a cell of 6 individuals that were in the process, the final processes of carrying out an attack against the school. The information was gathered, it was handed over to the authorities, and these individuals were arrested. The fusion of what we've been talking about and what Dan mentioned, a control room, a research department, empowered community, empowered volunteers, physical security, all of these things work together to ensure that the community is kept safe. This is one of the examples of zero casualty. This is the example of the whole system working together so that that attack didn't even have a chance of getting off the ground in the first place. And this is what we want to achieve so that our community never has to experience, God forbid, what other communities around the world have experienced. So what is the vision? I originally come from South Africa. We live in a very unique environment where you cannot leave your doors open at home. You have electric fences and alarms and systems and walls and things like that. And I'm not necessarily asking that the Jewish community do the same thing because, once again, Jewish life, the Jewish way of life is just as important. But what we do need to do is start treating our facilities like our homes. I don't let anyone into my home when my children are there. I make sure that my front door is locked. I don't expect someone else to do it for me. I make sure that anyone coming inside is someone that I know, that I trust. I have the right measures in place in different areas of different needs, but I put the right measures in place to protect my family, my loved ones. And yet, many of our facilities are wide open with no security, with people inside. And this is a change in culture. This is a change in the way of doing things. It doesn't mean we have to become unapproachable. It doesn't mean we have to become a closed society. What it does mean is we need to be protecting our community like we protect our family and children at home. Have a welcoming home. Anyone is welcome. That I need to know who you are, and I need to know why you're there, and I need to know that you're safe for my family inside. So that is a reality, and this is a shift that we need to have in place across the world. So what do we need to do across our schools and schools and facilities and events? Is take ownership. Focus on the things that we can control. Okay, there's certain elements that we can't, but this is our environment. This is our place. We can put measures in place. We can put in physical security structures. We can implement those procedures that keep the doors closed and practice the drills and do the things that we need to do. So take ownership. Don't outsource it to someone else and don't expect someone else to do it. Be part of the solution. Project strength. Project deterrence. Be aware of your surroundings. Report things if you need to do. Report anything that is uncomfortable. And you'll see control room. It's not, very often people feel guilty. I'm sure they'll think I'm stupid. Why am I reporting this? Like they're going to laugh at me. But the truth of the matter is the more you report, we will make the decision if something is a danger or not, or something serious or not. No one's going to judge you for reporting things. Those are the steps that actually save lives above most other things. Sharing information. So where the community feeds the information into the SOC, into the command center, it can be looked into. We can understand the environment and pass relevant information down to the community, to our protected teams, to our volunteers, to our partners. And through that, protect the community. And God forbid, in the unlikely event that something actually does happen after everything else that we put into place, that we have the procedures and the mechanisms in place to mitigate it, to save lives, and to ensure that the community can move on from there. So what is the strategy? And this is talking very much to what Dan mentioned. The strategy is to start enhancing the physical security around our facilities. There are three fundamental pillars of security, and these three things have to work together. It's the people, whether it's the staff, the kids at school, the members of a shul, whether it's the security officers, the volunteer teams, the police officers that look after our communities. They are the fundamental. Then there is the physical security. The things where someone wants to look at doing something harmful, and they come to our facilities and they go, well, that's actually quite a well-protected place. This is not the place for me. Let me go somewhere else. Putting things in, making sure doors are closed and reinforced, putting camera systems in place, alarm systems, panic buttons, these kinds of things, so that we can stop something from happening. And if something does happen, that it can reach out to the control room and can be picked up and can be managed from there. And then procedures. And this is one of the big things that we always talk about. Everything else falls apart without the procedures. You can have a $200,000 security system with gates and doors and walls and systems and processes that can be defeated by a $1 brick. Because the process of not closing that door, it's inconvenient. Let me open the door and put a brick there to keep it open, because people are going to get irritated having to come inside, having to wait to come inside, having to enter a code, whatever else it is. The procedures are just as important as everything else. We can put everything else into place, but if people do not buy into it, it is going to defeat the whole system. And we need these three things to work together. We spoke about the central command and control system. This is a control room. We will be tapping into cameras of facilities, alarm systems, panic buttons, giving the community access to certain panic buttons and tools that they can use. This thing is at the moment in a proof of concept trial. It's a little while off, but we will be implementing this. The trial is going absolutely amazingly, and we will be implementing this and rolling it out throughout the community. Training our volunteers, empowering our volunteers. I think I've spoken to this point throughout the presentation. Empowering our community to report things, to be aware of their surroundings, to be educated, to be informed, ensuring that our institutions understand the why of doing things, are prepared to put the measures in place, and to drive security from the top down across the organization. We're looking for partnership in this. Cannot force anyone to do it, but if we all work together, across the community, I think all our facilities will be much safer for it. Monitoring our risk environment, ensuring we understand the environment, ensuring we understand specific individuals and organizations that may be planning harmful acts against our community. Just as importantly, the relationships we have within our community, across the different organizations of our community. This is an apolitical organization, not linked to anything specific. We're protecting the whole community, and we will engage and work with everyone. Just as importantly are the relationships with the security companies that look after us, making sure that the right people, the right companies, we have that connection, and most importantly, to the intelligence services and the police, where we want to work hand in hand with them. No one can do this alone. We don't live in a world where we can now outsource it to someone else. We all need to play our part and work together with them, but they are a fundamental partner, and we will be building and have been building those relationships across the board. And then once again, just a system in place to prepare the community for whatever crisis, a natural disaster, something, God forbid, happening, where the community understands that it can happen. There are mechanisms in place to address the issue, to protect the community, to build a resilience within the community, and to recover thereafter. One or two last points that I want to make, and I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but it talks to the power of civilians and the power of community and people. This was a study done by a think tank that looks at terrorist organizations and terrorist attacks around the world. There's a study done in the United States on data between 2001 and 2016. And in that period, they worked out that over 50% of all terrorist attacks or foiled terrorist attacks had been dealt with not by the police and by the army, but by civilians themselves, by reporting things, by actually intervening and stopping something from happening. The importance of people not just expecting, of communities across the board, not just the Jewish community, all communities across the board, saying that we are part of this. This may happen to us. We are going to be there to deal with it. If I see something, I'll say something, and I do something about it. So when was the best time to start this? 20 years ago. We're now at a place where we need to start today. And that statement over there, please God, that we all get to enjoy in the very near future and in the far future, a secure environment with the right processes and procedures and structures in place to ensure that the community of Toronto is kept safe and sound. But today we have to start. We can't expect someone else to do it. We can't push it off. It's going to take time. These things take time. We have to build a robust, strong organization that can serve the whole community. We will work hand in hand with other organizations and partners and authorities across the board, but this cannot be done in one day. And we're going to try and do things that make a meaningful difference in the short term. But to build a real structure like this, to change the culture of the community, to get everyone involved in security, this takes time. And the sooner we all start working together to do so, the quicker and easier this will be. This is the last slide, and this is a comment made by the president of the Jewish community of Toulouse in 2012 after an attack against a Jewish school, which killed 4 people, a rabbi and 3 children. A radical individual went into the school and he opened fire. And the prelude to this was that the individual, that the school, the community, Toulouse as a city, didn't think that an attack would happen against them. Things like this happened in Paris, not in Toulouse. So they had great physical security, but they had recently let the security guard go. The parent volunteers that had been there were no longer around because they kind of lost interest along the way. They didn't think it was going to happen. The gate had a beautiful gate and a beautiful wall, secure, but the gate was left wide open. And this individual was able to get inside and devastate the community. And his words from an interview that he did was, it would be wrong not to take all preventative means against the worst case scenario. We always ask the same question. What would have happened had the situation been different? Had there been a guard in front of the school? Had the door been locked? had it been impossible for the terrorist to park his scooter and enter the school to commit his crime. We can't help but think that things would have been completely different. And this was my message to my community back in South Africa, and this is a message to you. Let's never be that community that turns around and says, if only we had done things. Now is our opportunity. Let's work together and let's make this happen. Thank you very much. And Steve, I'm going to hand back to you for Q&A.
Thank you, Javon, and thank you, Dan, Adam, and Jeff. This was a really fantastic overview of what the JSN is going to be doing. So everyone, we're going to dive right into the Q&A because we have a bit of time left. I've taken notes on the extensive questions that are coming through the chat, and we're going to do our best to get through as many of them as possible. Javon, I want to start with one big question that many people have around security, which is, here in Canada, it's not legally permissible for private security to be armed, other than in very rare cases, such as in guarding bank trucks. And so a lot of people struggle with this. They say, well, what is the value of security without arms? And of course, armed police can be hired to protect our institutions, but access to police resources, it really depends on what police have available in a city that has a lot of demands on them. So can you speak to this issue of the tools that we have to work with?
This is a common question. And we always talk about like security is the person, not the tools they have on them. Well, I'll go back to my original slide of zero casualties. Once you have gone to the firearm, everything else has failed along the way. We haven't picked up the information gatherers. We haven't identified that people are looking at our facilities. We haven't built the right structures and systems in place. The firearm is the last thing that we need in security. The real security is done in vigilance, in awareness, in making sure that we are aware of what's happening. We're addressing suspicious activity around there. We're reporting that kind of stuff to the thing. Look at the example, in Cape Town, the attack against the Wynberg Shul or the Marais Road Shul at that stage. That example is the perfect example. They never needed to go to. These were people that were there to do a real attack. But because of the structures, because of the people, because of the vigilance and awareness and the things that have been put in place, there was no need for firearms. In the 30 years that I've been involved in this industry, even though we have, in Johannesburg, there are 7 foiled attacks or attacks that we have actually dealt with. Not once was a firearm ever drawn. Everything was done proactively. Everything was done because people were aware. We had systems. We had the perception of security. We had the right people doing the right things and reporting the right stuff. So that's not sexy. That is, it's the boring stuff of security that really saves lives. The Hollywood stuff, of course, we need to make sure that people are prepared and ready to do it. But like anywhere in the world, that's the 1%. We can stop these things from happening over and over again. We can stop 99.9% of things against our community just by having a strong presence and putting the right mechanisms. So 3 Ps, good people, good procedures, and good physical security around our facilities.
Thank you, Javon. People have asked a number of questions, and I'm just going to kind of bundle them together here around the scope of the JSN's work. So some folks have asked, is this going to include overnight camps, Jewish nonprofit camps? Is this going to include early child care centers in our community, Jewish daycares? And also, is it going to go beyond Greater Toronto? And I'll start maybe with that last question, which is UJA Federation's mandate is the Greater Toronto area. But because we're a part of this federation system, which is North American wide, and because we're plugged into the global Jewish community through our relationships, our security work doesn't happen in a silo. It's going to involve a lot of communications and information sharing with our partners beyond Toronto, and also hopefully to support their own efforts to strengthen Jewish security in other parts of the country. So with this, and maybe this is for either Javon or for Dan, when you think about the work that you're going to be doing to support these institutions, in addition to the volunteer training, can you talk a little bit more around the kind of infrastructure upgrades that we're going to be looking to lead for camps, ECEs, schools, JCCs? People are very concerned about the level of preparedness. So I can see this in the chat. They're very concerned about the level of preparedness when it comes to simply accessing buildings in our community. So can you speak to that a little bit, Siobhan?
Yes, absolutely. And I think once again, I speak about empowering the community to protect itself. JSN is not going to protect the community as such. Of course, we will build mechanisms and structures in place. Our job is to empower the community, to build the awareness around the community, and to then work with the community to implement the structures, the systems, the physical security, the upgrades, to apply for grants, etc., etc. Really, this is a mindset shift from the top down in every single facility. They need to understand that they have to reach out to us. We can't force people to implement security. It really is the responsibility of the leadership to understand the why, and we can go into more details at a later stage on the why people need more convincing. I think in this environment, everyone understands that we need to do things. We got to start somewhere, and I think we need to focus very much around the synagogues, because we've got the Chagim coming up. We've already started with the schools. But I'll say absolutely that we are going to be working together with the summer camps. We're going to be working with the university students. We're going to be working with school kids in the right way. Of course, it has to be done very, very carefully. We're going to work across the community. We're going to assist in assessing physical security across the board. Our SOC will be available to anyone who wants to link into that, the security center, the command and control center. We have amazing technologies that can monitor facilities and things. And then investing in security, it's going to take a change in mindset. The community is not used to having closed doors or building fences and walls and things like that. And I'm not saying it has to be that way, but we have to start assessing each and every single one of our facilities. It's going to take time. We're going to bring resources on. We've got an amazing team already working to do that. We're bringing more and more people on to start reaching out to the communities, start going out to the communities to work with them, to build their physical security, do assessments on that, to recommend things, to assist in funding, to build those procedures, and to train the staff, the volunteers, if it's a volunteer structure, the participants, and everyone within the community. So once again, it's going to take time. We're reaching out to the biggest, where our children are, where our community is on a regular basis. We will expand and grow, and we'll continue to work with the others. So I'm saying we're still going to work with the police. We're going to work with intelligence. We're going to work with security companies. We're going to give them the information to be where they need to be when they need to be there. So I think this all coming together and working, this fusion of all the different elements, will most definitely, you'll see an improvement relatively soon. But definitely building this robust system is going to take a little bit of time to get there, with your help.
Yvonne, that's great. And building on that theme of with your help, you know, people are asking in the chat about the training and kind of engaging volunteers. And we're getting kind of two themes coming through. One is people asking, you know, I'm already involved as a volunteer with my synagogue or with a grassroots group in the community. Are you going to work with us? What role can we play together? And then others are saying, you know, I'm just a regular community member that's not been involved at all before. And what is the training going to look like? If I do put my hand up and say I want to volunteer, what do you see as kind of the vision for engaging and deploying volunteers throughout the community?
So deploying volunteers is going to be something that's going to take time to do, and we're going to build a core group of volunteers that JSN itself will deploy out to certain things, maybe events and camps and things like that. That'll take time. What we're trying to build is a volunteer structure that looks after a parent looking after their own child's school, or a community member looking after their own synagogue. We will work with the security companies and train them, because I'm sure some of them are great, but there's definitely training that's needed, sensitivity training, understanding the environment, understanding the threats and things. So those are the easy parts. I think the biggest part of our training, and it will be, there'll be different levels of training across the board. We'll start off with awareness training. Right now, we're rolling out some courses on awareness, being vigilant, what to do, how to report it, how to call for help, or how to intervene if you need to. But we will make sure that we are running a number of different courses across the board. As I say, once again, for university students, they have a different need to a member standing outside a shul or a school. There will be people that have more time to get involved, and that training will be more intensive. We're looking for volunteers to step up and be leaders at their facilities and drive security and run teams of volunteers underneath them and take ownership of that. There's specific training around that we'll do. And then the actual protectors or volunteers on the ground, the vast majority, once again, is fundamental security principles. And yes, some of it will be exciting for those that want excitement and self-defense stuff that we're going to do and all that, and scenarios, whatever it may be. But it really is the fundamentals of keeping those gates closed, of dealing with what needs to happen, of reporting things, of identifying things, of addressing them, and making sure that we stop them before they start. In South Africa, our training can go anywhere from very fundamental to very exciting, all within the bounds of the law. And I think this is an important thing. We're not going to do anything that contradicts or conflicts with the laws of the country. We're not going to build militias. We're not going to train people to do dangerous things and silly things. We're going to make sure that this community is responsible, the organization is responsible, and we're training you to be responsible and to do things the right way alongside the authorities and within the law.
Thank you, Javon. People have asked a number of questions, some of which are more detailed, some of which are broader. I just want to share with everyone, in a session like this, where we're providing an opportunity to speak to the whole community, and we really want to be as transparent as possible and share as much as we can with as many people in the community as we can. But we also recognize that because we're putting this out to the public, there might be people on this call who don't necessarily share our community's interests. And so we have to be selective in the questions we take on and in the information we share. But if you have specific questions about your institution or about something that we haven't answered in this call, please email us at info@jewishtoronto.com. That's info@jewishtoronto.com. We will pass it over to the JSN team and ensure there's follow-up. But just be aware that this is an open session, and we will be sharing a recording tomorrow on our YouTube channel and in our Friday newsletter for anyone who you feel should have seen this session and would get value out of it. And so I think we have time for just one more question, Javon. And a number of people have asked about police and reporting and our relationship with police, JSN's relationship with police, I should say. On the one hand, people have asked, do I report to police first or do I report to the JSN? Because we're maintaining the hotline, of course. But people have also asked, what role is the JSN going to play in working with police, and kind of what do you see as the partnership with police?
So first of all, and from the outset, you always report, an emergency is reported to the police straight away. For now, you're not going to report an emergency to us. You will report after the incident. Once you are safe and in a safe place or it has been dealt with, then of course JSN wants to know about it. And we will then step in to assist you in liaising with the police, in putting the right processes in place, in making sure that you're approaching the right people to get the right result. If, God forbid, an anti-Semitic incident or something else happens, or you just want to report something. From a point of view, we've already made massive headway with the various elements of Toronto Police across the board. We have some amazing people sitting on the board who are well connected, and have great relationships already. And some of our staff members have already gone out and started meeting with senior level and mid-level and operational police officers. This is definitely going to be a fundamental element of it. We have a great relationship with them. Of course, we have a lot to prove. Of course, we've got a lot of work to do. Partnerships and relationships take time to develop, but they recognize us as a serious organization. They recognize the needs of the Jewish community and the threats to the Jewish community across Toronto. And every experience we've had so far has been very, very willing police officers and others ready to engage. We're going to be assisting and liaising with them. If you have any suggestions, or if you would like us to assist you in any way whatsoever, then just reach out and we'll. But we have a great relationship with them, and I think it's going to get stronger and stronger.
Thanks, Javon. And also, I just want to underscore from the UJA perspective, especially since October 7th, we've made a real effort to communicate as quickly as possible when we hear about important information that police have conveyed or that our previous team, UJA Community Security, conveyed to us. And that relationship and that communication is going to continue with the JSN being in place. UJA, through our channels, has access to the broadest audience within our community through social media, through our email lists. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel on this. We want to ensure that when Javon and his team say there's something critical that the community needs to know, within minutes, we are going to send a message out to everyone who's on our list. We're going to post on social media, and we're going to ensure that we reach as many people as possible. So I want to put in a call to action to everyone on this call. If you are not signed up to UJ's newsletters, although I imagine everyone is, please do so. And please encourage others to do so as well, because when there is critical information to share, God forbid, we want to ensure that there's as little delay as possible between us getting that info out and people in the community receiving it. So please sign up and stay tuned. Javon and Adam, Dan, and Jeff, thank you so much for today's session. Again, folks, if you have any questions that weren't addressed in this call, please email us info@jewishtoronto.com. And of course, the security hotline remains in place, and we've dropped it in the chat there, I believe. You might want to program it in your phones, in fact. It's 416-635-5600. That's a 24/7 hotline. But again, as Javon said, that's for after the fact. When it's an emergency, always call 911 first. But please let us know when you're safe that something has taken place. So with that, we wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day. I feel like it's too early to wish people Shana Tova. We're not quite there yet, but it's very much on our minds as we get the community as ready as possible for the high holidays. So with that, I'm going to thank you, Javon, for joining us and for really your important work to support our security in the community. I certainly feel we're blessed to have someone like you with this amount of experience and real world knowledge who's chosen to come to our community and to dedicate your career, the next step of your career, to making our community as safe as it can be. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for tuning in.